Our story starts around 1850, and the land where the hotel sits today was the royal palace of King Rama III. Right next door to the palace, on this land here, stood a very small sailor's guest house, which was opened in 1860 by Captain James White. White died in 1863, and the business was taken over by two Americans who opened it up as Thailand's first ever hotel, called the Oriental. Unfortunately, further tragedy struck in 1865 when the hotel, along with 67 other properties, was burnt to the ground. Unable to revive the business, by 1881 they had sold it to a Danish businessman called Hans Niel Andersen. Andersen was friends with one Prince Prisjang of Siam, and together they came up with a plan to build a whole new hotel on the land where the palace stood. After putting a few plans together, Hans Niel Andersen felt they needed a bit more financial muscle, so he called upon Peter Andersen and Frederick Kinch to come in as partners, and they set up a company to run the hotel. They hired an Italian architecture firm to design the original building. That original building still stands today as the world famous Author's Wing. In 1893, Hans Niel Andersen sold the business to an American, Franklin Bill Hearst, for $22,000. Andersen then returned to Denmark and set up the East Asiatic Company that provided fine wines and imported goods to the hotel. Not long after, Andersen returned to Bangkok and opened up a branch here, right next door to the hotel. Charing Cross Road originated in 1860, partly because foreign sailors and diplomats arriving along the river complained that there was nowhere to go out and get any fresh air. So a rudimentary track was laid, and this enabled them to go out and see the city in their horse-drawn carriages. Over the next couple of decades, this area expanded and a lot more businesses were moving around here. Tram lines were laid so people could get around a lot easier, and Charing Cross Road, which was also known as New Road, became the premier business district.
There it was, spread largely on both banks, the Oriental capital, which has yet suffered no white conqueror. Here and there in the distance, above the crowded mob of low brown roof ridges, towered great piles of masonry, kings' palaces, temples, gorgeous and dilapidated, crumbling under the vertical sunlight.
As for the competition, well, the Oriental didn't need to worry about that. It was the only luxury hotel of its kind in the whole country, the first ever to be built. It was also the first hotel to have electricity, its carpets, its chandeliers, its wallpaper, all imported. It was also the first hotel where you could get an alcoholic drink, and for visiting royalty and celebrities, that was a no-brainer. At the turn of the 20th century, the hotel found itself going through several different owners. In 1899, Hearst sold the business to a consortium led by Mr. W. Downey. They refurbished the hotel and reopened it, but unfortunately business was pretty terrible, so they sold it on in 1903 to Mr. F.S. Robertson, who was a bit of a mystery man. He disappeared a few months later, owing a lot of people a lot of money. After Robertson's disappearance, the hotel closed down until 1905, when an American called Carl G. Edwards took the reins. He ploughed his life savings into the business and hired a manager called Madame M.O. Bougelet. She reinvigorated the hotel, bringing in an orchestra from Venice, hiring a French chef, and making the Oriental famous for its musical dinners. It was most definitely a triumphant return to the good times. The successful years of Madame M.O. Bougelet lasted until 1910. She'd been the first ever female manager of the hotel. She was then succeeded by one Maria Marie, who set about revamping the place and took it into its golden era. During World War II, the Japanese army occupied the hotel. The officers took up residence, it became their officers' club, and by the time Allied forces reclaimed it, it had suffered serious damage, its fixtures and fittings looted, and was in a serious state of disrepair. After the Second World War, an American called Jim Thompson arrived on the scene and took up residence. He, along with 5 other businessmen, tried to revive the fortunes of the hotel, but Thompson left after a year because they couldn't agree on anything. The hotel reopened in June 1947 under the ownership of Germaine Krull. She quickly restored the hotel to the status of the place to stay in Thailand. She also opened up the Bamboo Bar, which quickly gained a following from the rich and famous. As well as the Bamboo Bar, Germaine Krull added a couple of world-class restaurants into the mix that only enhanced the reputation of the Oriental as one of the best hotels in the world. Expansion of the hotel became inevitable, and as the Oriental sailed seamlessly towards the 60s, in 1958 the 10-storey garden wing was added, as well as the Normandy restaurant and the city's first elevator. More rooms, more luxury, more celebrities, and an elevation to the world's best hotel status.
thought that I could be true. I never thought that I would be true. But since I met you, I'm thinking that maybe I'd be true to you.
And here we are in 2021, the Oriental continues along the path of legends, its history, its heritage firmly written in stone. I hope you've enjoyed this historic look at an iconic establishment. If you want to subscribe to my channel, there's a link in the description. So until the next one, I'll see you soon.